All right, so the next major concept that will be covered on the LEAP is the Watergate scandal. This actually cost President Richard Nixon his presidency. So it's something that's going to come up. It's pretty, very likely. President Richard Nixon is accused of covering up an illegal wiretap of the Democratic National headquarters, okay, at the Watergate Hotel. All right, so here's what's going on. Nixon has a flaw. He's a great president. He really is. But he has one major flaw, and that's he's paranoid. Okay? He thinks everybody's out to get him. He's up for re-election, and he's going to win. Okay? But what he's worried about is, do the Democrats have some kind of damaging information on him? So what he did is he got some operatives, some spies basically. He called them his plumbers. And they were to break into the Watergate Hotel to tap the phones and to look for files that had damaging information on Richard Nixon. Well, the spies got caught in the act of breaking into the hotel, okay? And the question is, did the president put them up to it, or did they act on their own accord, okay? So, the Washington Post writers Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein released the story, which later becomes a congressional investigation. The Republican Senator Howard Baker and Senator Sam Evern pushed for determining the level of the president's involvement. Like I said, what did he know? When did he know it? Okay? So, what happens is, Richard Nixon, in the investigation, they're investigating Nixon, they're investigating everybody. In the investigation, they find out that the vice president, a guy named Spiro Agnew, actually was cheating on his taxes, which was completely unrelated to the Watergate scandal. So Spiro Agnew has to resign. And a new vice president, which is Gerald Ford, has to be appointed. Okay, Nixon does that, and they continue on with the investigation. During the course of the investigation, they find out that Richard Nixon is so paranoid that he has taped secretly every conversation in the White House for the last 4 years. So the Supreme Court, when they hear this, they say if he's guilty, then the answer is going to be on those tapes. So the Attorney General at the time, he asked Richard Nixon for the tapes. There's something called the Saturday Night Massacre, okay? He basically calls a hearing, Richard Nixon's there, and he says, Mr. President, I want those tapes. Well, the position of Attorney General is appointed by the President, which means the President can fire the Attorney General. So when he says, I want those tapes, he said, you're fired. Now let's swear in a new Attorney General. He picked another guy, he swore him in. And he said, and the new guy said, Mr. President, I hate to tell you, but I want to hear those tapes too. And he fired him. Then the third guy gets sworn in the same meeting as Attorney General of the United States. And he said, Mr. President, I'm sorry to tell you, I want to hear those tapes too. So he fired the third Attorney General within an hour. And then he called an end to the meeting. So that was a really bad thing for Nixon because it made him look super guilty. Richard Nixon refused to hand over the tapes because of what he's called executive privilege. He said there's things on those tapes that don't need to be made public because I'm the President of the United States. I've had conversations with Mao Zedong in my office, which is the leader of China. I've had conversations with many world leaders that don't need to be made public. Therefore, I'm not giving you those tapes. Well, the Supreme Court eventually rules unanimously that Richard Nixon must turn over the tapes. And he did. He turned them over with 18 minutes missing. Now, I don't know about you, but if somebody tracked all my conversations for 4 years, I would take out a lot more than 18 minutes. And even with the stuff that he took out, with the stuff that he left in, all proved that he was guilty. So, what did Richard Nixon take out if he left in the proof that he was guilty? Probably, in my opinion, what he said he was going to take out. Those sensitive meetings with world leaders. Okay? So, now that Richard Nixon has basically been proven to be guilty, he resigns from the presidency of the United States. He has 2 years left in his office. He quits because he says he doesn't want to drag America through a 2-year impeachment trial and get nothing done for the next 2 years. Well, if the president quits or resigns or dies, you all know what happens next. The Vice President of the United States is supposed to take over, which is Gerald R. Ford. He's one of our weakest presidents ever. Gerald Ford takes over, and one of his first acts as president is he pardons Richard Nixon for the Watergate scandal. He basically says Richard Nixon will serve no time. This makes him a very unpopular president. A lot of Americans wanted to see Richard Nixon go to prison over what he had done, okay? And by letting him off the hook, a lot of people thought that he and Nixon had made a deal. Basically, I'll make you president if you pardon me. You know, I'll quit if you give me the pardon. So Gerald Ford himself was a very unpopular president, didn't get much done, and he was only a one-term president because the people didn't trust him. All right, moving on. We did all that stuff. Okay, during Nixon's presidency, he sought a court order to stop the publication of the, oh, we didn't go over that. Hold on. Okay, I'll just tell you about it. Okay, so all while this is going on, by the way, a group of papers gets released called the Pentagon Papers, okay? Now, the Pentagon Papers are the ones that said that Franklin Roosevelt knew about Pearl Harbor. The Pentagon Papers proved that Lyndon Johnson got us into the war, into the Vietnam War, on a lie, okay, with the Gulf of Tonkin incident, if you remember that from earlier this chapter, and a bunch of other stuff that looked really bad on the United States government. Okay, the Pentagon Papers, basically, the message is, your government's lying to you, and they're not telling you the truth at all. There's a huge credibility gap, if you remember that term. They're saying one thing but doing another. That all leaks out during Richard Nixon's impeachment trial, during all this stuff, okay? So during Nixon's presidency, he sought the court order to stop the publication of the Pentagon Papers. The Supreme Court ruled against him, finding that such a court order would violate what? All right, well, who was trying to print the Pentagon Papers? Well, it's going to be the media, okay? The news people. So which one is it going to violate? It's going to violate freedom of the press, okay? So, moving on, next one. A constitutional crisis resulted during Watergate when President Nixon claimed executive privilege to justify his refusal to turn subpoenaed tapes over to the White House Judiciary Committee. How was this issue solved? Well, let's see. Okay. Yeah, Supreme Court unanimously ruled that Nixon must turn over the tapes. Okay, he did, but what was the problem with the tapes? 18 minutes were missing, but it still proved his guilt. Okay, what was one of the most significant effects of the Watergate scandal? Okay, I revealed that politicians do not always tell the truth. Well, we all know that. It weakened public trust in government officials. Okay, it created a new process for selecting vice president. It proved that the process of impeachment was, all right, it's B, y'all. Basically, Watergate with the Pentagon Papers and the Vietnam War all meshed together to basically have this huge message to never trust your government and never trust government officials. I'm sure you've heard people say, well, all politicians are liars and stuff. They weren't saying that stuff before Watergate. Okay, this is where things really changed, and the press starts going after the politicians instead of protecting the politicians from scandals. So, all right, next video we're going to talk about President Ford.